Good evening, this is Michael Leahy of the Irish Freedom Party. I have to say it's become increasingly clear to me that the government in this country has now decided that the last vestiges of Ireland's sovereignty and neutrality are to be destroyed. This is obvious in the first instance in the posturing of our Foreign Affairs Minister in regard to trying to persuade the Irish people to join NATO, and in the manner in which we are being morally blackmailed into supporting a series of economic and sanctions policies, as well as immigration measures, which are ruinous to our economy and to our future. However, what I want to look at today is another quite insidious and more immediate attack against our sovereignty, and that is the proposed WHO pandemic treaty. What this effectively amounts to is that Ireland would agree by treaty, under the force of international law, to delegate its responsibility in terms of reaction to a health pandemic to the World Health Organization. What is important to understand is that it is the WHO and not the national governments which will determine what constitutes a pandemic. What we recently witnessed during COVID would not have been considered as a pandemic some years ago until that term was redefined by the WHO. I would think that the international reaction to that so-called pandemic is one of the worst examples of misgovernment, certainly in recent memory. And it is a serious indication that the modern internationalist and media-driven governments are not capable of governing effectively in the interests of their own people. There is no doubt in my mind that the actions taken by our government during the pandemic led to multiple unnecessary deaths, led to the looting of our economy, the destruction of many private businesses, the creation, which we're now witnessing, of a rampant inflation, and the putting in place of an infrastructure of propaganda and police state power which are not compatible with the values of a modern democratic society. It is also clear that as far as those who seek to impose a one-world globalist government are concerned, the pandemic has worked out rather well. The newly proposed pandemic treaty of the WHO seems to be an extension of that same process. It would enable the WHO to decide over the heads of national governments when lockdowns are to be implemented, what severity they should entail, what treatments are to be imposed on the population, and more importantly, what treatments are to be prevented from being given to the population. One of the great scandals of the last so-called health event was that perfectly valid treatments which had been in use for years were not made available to the public, and those doctors who tried to prescribe them to try to save their patients' lives were attacked not just by government, but by their own medical establishments. It should be remembered in regard to the WHO that its head, Tedros Ghebreyesus, is not a medical doctor. He is, in fact, a radical Marxist who was imposed on the WHO by the Chinese government. He had been accused of war crimes in his own country. The danger of an aggressive Marxist attack being waged against innocent populations through health coercion becomes clearer by the day. We will never have a proper investigation into what happened during our own pandemic lockdown, but those who care to look at the facts will know that what we did was reckless and destructive. It had almost no benefit in terms of health safety. It was determined more by public manipulation than by rational science, and it clearly caused enormous damage to the health of many thousands of people. And this is before we even assess the full ramifications of the all but mandatory vaccination programs. In this regard, it is of some interest that one of the members of the new NEFIT, we were all hoping that would be abandoned, but one of the new members is a behavioural economist. Is it not now becoming clear that health coercion is coming to be seen as the preferred option of population control, of controlling freedom of speech, of limiting the rights and liberties of a once free people? It is clear to me that the attacks against our state, against our democracy, and against our nationhood are being ramped up in recent months to a quite extraordinary degree. The undermining of our neutrality, the unquestioning acceptance of the NATO narrative in the present war in Europe, the use of violent crime as a means of attacking liberty and free speech, the proposal to destroy property rights under the 39th Amendment to the Constitution. These are all part of a pattern aiming towards the dreadful denouement of the Agenda 2030, where, in the words of Klaus Schwab, you will own nothing and you will be happy, whether you like it or not. We need to wake up And we need to do it fast, because the days of freedom of action, freedom of response, freedom of speech, and of our ability to call the government to account are being eroded on an almost daily basis. Do you really believe, if the present processes continue, that we will continue to have free and fair elections in this country? I don't think so. You need to get yourself involved, because our government institutions clearly can no longer be trusted. The Irish Freedom Party offers you one avenue whereby you can resist the tyranny that is being imposed on the Irish people. I strongly suggest that you use that vehicle, because it seems clear to me that we will not be able to talk openly on these matters for very long more. It appears to me that quite shortly we will not even be able to have the ability to address you, or to warn you of what your government has planned, or to try to advise you of what is really happening in your country. This has been Michael Leahy of the Irish Freedom Party, appealing to you to wake up before it's too late. Thank you.